Hello, welcome to Daily Hope. My name is George Negretti. For those of you that know me, maybe you don't know that I spent 1 year as a 5th grade teacher. I taught for 1 year at a Christian school, and one of my very distinct memories from that year was going to science camp with those kids. And one of the activities that the counselor had us do when we were at the science camp was a faith walk. And so after the sun had went down and it was very dark outside, we walked out into the woods, into the hills, and the counselor said that each child was going to walk in the dark in the forest along a trail for a certain amount of time by themselves. And they were just going to have to trust that the counselor was giving them good instruction on how to get safely to the other side of that trail. Well, my heart began to beat a little bit faster when the counselor said, "Now, Mr. Negretti, you're going to be here with the kids until the last child goes over, and then you'll come over last." Well, what I heard was I also was going to have to walk along that trail by myself in the darkness. Well, I have to admit that with every child walking along that path and making it safely to the other side, I knew they made it safely because I didn't hear any cries for help from any of the children, that I began to get more confident that I too was going to make it through that faith walk challenge. Now, we find ourselves in very uncertain times where we don't really know what is ahead of us as we navigate through the coronavirus mitigation efforts and outbreak across the world. And one of the things that can give us hope as well as confidence is looking to God's Word for some other examples of those who were going through uncertain times, perhaps some that were actually in a time of isolation, and how they got through it. And I know that in Psalm 57, David writes that psalm most likely from a time when he was in isolation in a cave on the run from King Saul, who was trying to kill him. And we can learn how to have hope in uncertain times, I believe, from Psalm 57. Let me read a couple of verses from that chapter. In Psalm 57 it says, "Have mercy on me, O God. Have mercy. I look to you for protection." In times of uncertainty, one of the best things that we can do is we can look up. We can look up to God and ask Him for help. If we're dealing with anxiety because of an uncertain future, remember, God is always there, always present, in order to hear your prayer and to give you help. This is what David is saying. He's saying, I look to you for protection. We can also look to God for protection in uncertain times. Verse 2, "I cry out to God Most High, to God who will fulfill His purpose for me." I find that very interesting, David saying, He will fulfill His purpose for me. While David is in a cave, he still remembers that he has a purpose, and his purpose was great. The prophet Samuel anointed him with oil and said that he was going to be the next king. Well, here he is in isolation in a cave, and he's reminding himself of his purpose. We need to remind ourselves of the purpose that God has for us during these uncertain times. The situations around us don't change the promises that God has for us. And matter of fact, I believe that God makes more clear His purposes for our lives during these uncertain times. And God might reveal even a new purpose for you. So ask God, what is your purpose for me during these uncertain times? I know that that's going to definitely help you to get through any times of anxiety or uncertainty and to find hope in God. And then moving on, verse 3 says, "He will send help from heaven to rescue me. My God will send forth His unfailing love and faithfulness." God's going to rescue you, God's going to help you, and He's going to continue to be faithful. And verse 7, "My heart is confident in you." Remember earlier I said with each child that made it safely across that faith walk, my confidence began to build. One of the best things we can do in times of uncertainty is to remind ourselves of the times that God has been faithful to us in the past, how God has provided for every one of our needs. And if He's done that for us in the past, why would we think that He would do anything different now? David reminds himself of this when he's in the cave, and it builds his faith. It builds his hope. So we can learn from David when he's in these times of uncertainty, when he's in isolation in a cave, how we can find hope in God. We can look up to God. We can remind ourselves of His purpose for our lives, And we can be confident that He will bring us through these times because He has been faithful to us in the past. I hope that this encouraging word for you today does bring hope into your life. Please feel free to share this with others in hopes that they also will find hope in God's word. Thank you for joining me today.